Welcome to the Learner-Centered Collaborative Podcast. I'm your host, Katie Martin, and today I will be chatting with Monte Syrie. I was drawn to interview Monte after following him on social media. I appreciate his approach to teaching and learning and challenging the status quo through iteration and learning and sharing every day. Before we dive in, I'll share a bit more about Monte. Monty's a high school English teacher and has been in the classroom for over 25 years. Unsettled with the status quo in public education, he founded Project 180, where he is embarking on sharing his journey as he seeks better ways to create more meaningful learning experiences for his students. Love that. Each day, 180 in total, he posts a reflection about his work that his kids are doing and finding different, finding better. And he's also the author of Better, A Teacher's Journey, Project 180, sharing his experience in the classroom and what he's learned. Welcome, Monte. Definitely excited to have you here and excited to chat with you.
Okay, thank you.
So let's start with my favorite question. What are some of the key experiences that have shaped you into the educator that you are today?
Okay, I'm gonna do this a little differently than I normally do it, Katie, and I'm gonna bookend this, and I'm gonna start with right now,
Okay.
and then I'll come back to it at the end. And as I woke up this morning and was reflecting on my work, our work, um, I find myself a little broken right now, and so, but I think that that's a key experience, and I think all of my experiences have led me to this place of being broken, but not defeated. Maybe a little damaged is a better word. I don't know, but so I'm gonna come to that in the end. And so I'll start with the beginning. School was a place for me um, in my young life, which was not an easy life. We lived in poverty, and my mom was married 3 times. We moved a lot, and so school for me became that place of stability. I had many great teachers who I was lucky enough to bond with closely, and they became, again, the guiding lights that I needed in my life. And the longer I was in school, the more I loved school. As a matter of fact, I never really wanted to leave, and I always joke that's why I became a teacher, because I didn't want to leave school. Really, though, I owe Mr. Hamrick, my eighth grade language arts teacher, a nod here, because he was such a fantastic teacher. And I think, Katie, what really finally cemented the deal for me, or sealed the deal, if you will, is that he treated us like humans.
Mhm.
And not that other teachers hadn't do that, but for me at that point in my life, it really felt like this guy makes us feel like we matter every single day. And I did truly feel like that. And so I give him a lot of credit for pursuing education. No one in my family has ever gone to college before. I was first generation. And so that's what got me into teaching. And I pursued language arts or English because that was always my favorite class. And again, I think Mr. Hammer gets some credit for that too. And so this is year 28 for me. And as I shared, I'm here kind of broken at the beginning of year 28. And so I taught middle school for my first 7 years. I taught both seventh and eighth grade language arts, mostly eighth grade. And that was a wondrous experience. And I made a lot of mistakes, and I think that's why it was such a wondrous experience. And I was lucky enough my second year to have the same exact kids 2 years in a row. So I had them in seventh grade, and then they needed me to be the eighth grade teacher. So by luck, I had the same kids, and that's where I really learned about the power of relationships. No one talked to us about relationships back in those days. No one was talking about SEL. No one was talking about relationships. I thought the mark of a good teacher was keeping kids in their desks working silently, and if I could do that, then I was going to be successful. And I tried that my first year, and it was not me, it was not them, it was not us. And what a tale of 2 years, in terms of difference in moving with those kids. And they really did teach me about relationships and the power of connections, and how important they are in our day to day and our year to year. And so I owe those first year kids a lot of credit for teaching me about what was really important in school. And so I made relationships a big part of what I did from there on. And I kind of just went the same route that most of us do. We kind of get shoved into a fast game, and we learn by trial and tribulation. And but also I think we start to discover that maybe the emperor's not always wearing the clothes that we think he's wearing. And I had one such moment. There are a lot of other things I could share, but I want to jump to year 20. And so in year 20, I finally made a decision that I was going to do things differently because I could no longer do things the way I had always done them. I had always questioned them. In particular, I had always questioned the role of grading in our work, and I'd always felt like there was something amiss, that something that wasn't quite right. I felt it at grading time. I felt it in the day-to-day interactions with my kids when they would ask me questions like, is this going to be graded? And so I finally decided to jump into the year by giving kids A's for an entire year. And that's where Project 180 began. And so I just decided to give every one of my kids a wooden A that I had fashioned at home over that summer. They walked in the door. I handed them the A without really telling them what it was for. But in the introductory part of the year, I said, okay, guys, this is your A for the year. It's going to be yours no matter what. There is nothing that you can do to change that. And of course, they looked at me with all different signs of disbelief and distrust. And I told them I was doing it for one simple reason, and that was to take grading off the table so we could only focus on learning for the next 180 days. And that's how Project 180 got started. And we had an incredible year. I learned so much about myself as a teacher. I learned so much about our work and what's lacking. And it's kind of sad to me and kind of crazy to me, Katie, that I had to figure out what was lacking by actually taking something away. I learned what we needed by what I took away, and that was just to really focus on what matters, and that's kids and learning. And that was in 2016, and here I am at year 28, and I've done a lot more work with trial and tribulation. And I call it better. I call it do, reflect, do better. I'm continually, if you will, turning myself upside down 180 degrees at a time. So I have to find my way back to getting myself on my feet. And that's just kind of how I approach things. And as I was sharing, I'm feeling kind of broken right now. And I wonder sometimes if I'm the problem, right? Because I do things so differently and my practices are so unconventional. And I wonder and worry at times if I'm the problem. And as I've reflected on that this morning, I kind of arrived at the idea that I'm the problem's problem. My unconventional practices are a result of what I believe are institutional issues that we have pretended that don't exist for far too long. And I think even worse, Katie, I think we buttress up what we've done by just doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I just can't do that. And so if that makes me the problem, then that makes me the problem. But I would say this, the system broke me and I didn't quit. Instead,
Right.
all I did was find a way of being that I think made better sense in regards to the work that I do every single day with the young humans in my room. And so that's kind of where I am right now.
I love it. Thank you I'm like making notes of all the things that I want to dive into. And I appreciate where you started about your teachers and the connections that they made. But something you said stood out. He treated you like a human,
Yeah,
right? Um, and then you went on to talk about you becoming a teacher and the relationships that you developed and how that really was the most important thing in your classroom and with your students and what you're emphasizing. And yet, you're an English language arts teacher. You're a heavily tested subject, scrutinized, you're on all that. And I see the weight of, as I say that. But when you talk about your kids and you talk about their learning, it is really about them as humans. And what a miss that is not something like you mentioned. It's not what gets taught in the classroom management
yeah,
courses. Isn't what gets taught about what makes a great teacher. Yet
right.
we know in our own reflection and in our own experience that is really at the core of what makes a teacher. Always, you have to see them, know them before we can actually grow anyone in the space that we really want to.
Absolutely.
So, question that I want to dive into is, well, so one, you said you gave the students A's. I'm kind of curious. When you gave them the A's, what happened that year? What learning transpired and without the grades on the table? I was going to ask way later, but I'm so intrigued.
Yeah, so I think two main things happened. I think one, it really kind of like forced me to put up or shut up when it came to relationships, right? Like, we can talk about how we have relationships, and we do all the time, but too often it seems like those relationships only can go so far because the kids know that there's a grade attached to their experience in our classroom, whether that's right or wrong. But that's how they feel, like this is the guy who's grading me, right?
Mhm.
And so, but now that grading was off the table, I really had to rely upon those relationships because of the influence that I wanted to be for my kids, the positive influence that I wanted to be for my kids, to get them to pursue learning for the sake of growing and building themselves, not for satisfying a grade or doing it for me or their parents. Do it for yourself, kiddo. I have tried to liberate you with this. And so I found myself really having to rely heavily upon um, our relationships. And not that I hadn't done that before, but it added a whole new level to it that I did not anticipate. But it was awesome. And then the other thing I think that I really learned from that year is that we need to make everything about getting to the sweet spot of learning, and that is the feedback response process, because that's what it became about. It wasn't now I'm turning this in to get a grade. It's now I'm letting Sai see this so he can give me some feedback on it so I can grow. And that's where I really discovered like teaching is responding, right? Like, just because I'm talking at the kids, just because I'm assigning something, just because I assess something, I don't feel like I've necessarily taught kids anything until I have responded to them with feedback. And so that is why I ask my kids all the time now, please ask me for help, right? That's how you activate who I am as a teacher. When I'm helping you, I am teaching. If I'm not helping you, I'm not sure what it is that I am doing. So those are the two key things I think that I learned from that first year in Project 180 is how truly important relationships are. And then second, how important the feedback response process is. And when we take the artificiality of grades out of there, we can more deeply and authentically dive into that feedback process.
So I'm gonna, pull in the critic's voice here and kind of pull you in. So you have this high school classroom where, you're focusing on relationships, kids all get A's. So, this is the criticism. They just do whatever they want. Are they sitting around listening on their phones, not doing anything? What's happening in your classroom? What does it look like to be learning without grades on the table?
The day to day didn't look all that different. I think part of that, Katie, it was the kids for a time didn't necessarily trust that I was going to, follow through and give them an A for the entire year. So I think a lot of them initially were kind of doing out of compliance, which is not what I wanted at all, but it was just kind of that after effect, if you will, of the experiences that they'd had in the past. But basically our day to day did not look all that different. We just dove into the work for the sake of learning. And of course, I had to be way more mindful about the type of work that I was putting in front of them because I wanted it to be meaningful. I wanted it to be relevant. It wasn't just for the sake of having so many grades in my grade book by quarters end. It's just about like, we were still focused on our standards, right? Like I didn't ditch our priority standards. We still had
Right.
our priority standards. It's just now getting to them was a different experience from just checking it off the list. It's like, let's take a deep dive into this, kiddos. Let's begin where each of you are and let's just grow, and that's the other thing I think that really has kind of materialized in terms of my approach now is like we can talk proficiency all day long, right? I would rather talk about growth because that is really the only thing that I feel like I can do right now. We talk about collective efficacy and we talk about all of these things, But there's also that teacher efficacy, right? That we know is super important in terms of the experience that we have in the classroom.
Sure.
And, you know, for me, that is about helping kids grow. That is something I can control. I can't do a whole lot about that external data that comes
Sure.
back into my classroom from the SBA, from other things that are happening. You know, I feel like the only thing I can control is where I'm meeting my kids each day, and I can help each kid grow. Because, you know, no surprise, Katie, I've never had the room yet or the class in 28 years where all kids showed up at grade level ready to go, right?
What? You
Yeah.
didn't get that
Yeah.
class?
No, I haven't gotten that. I'm thinking year 29. So I'm thinking next year is going to be
Next.
that year. But until then, I will just continue to meet kids where they are and help them move along their way in a short amount of time. And really, if we truly ever pause and think about how much time we have with kids, we are barely a blip on their radars. And so the fact that we get as much done with them as we do in the short amount of time we have, we are miracle workers as far as
Yeah.
I mean, you know, woohoo teachers, right? Like, no,
Yes.
most people don't have a clue about what we are able to do in the short amount of time we have with the resources that we have, with all the other issues that we have.
Sure.
So, you know, and so really the day to day, you know, the critics, like, no, we weren't just lounging around. We were about the learning because we were about each other. We were in this together. It wasn't about the grade. It was about the opportunity that we had been given of the 180 days to learn together. And that's really what we tried to do.
And I'm, stating the obvious, but like each of your students did grow. You saw them grow in their writing and communicating, literacy
Absolutely.
skills.
Of course, of course. You know, and I don't want to even. I mean, they got 97%. My classes got 97% on the smarter balanced assessment that year. Now, whether that was because of what we did or not, I don't know, and I don't really care because I don't. I mean, I feel like I'm being a hypocrite, right? Because I don't care about that data, so I'm not going to necessarily throw that data out there as the proof that it worked. But you know, there were some critics out there in my building who thought like, well, we'll see when they get to the SBA in the spring, and they did fantastically.
Okay, so I'm not going to let you off the hook here because I
Okay.
know it feels like you're being a hypocrite and you're kind of calling out the test scores. I was just looking for this quote because I so believe that your approach and what you're talking about is exactly, it doesn't have to be at odds, right? Meaningful, deep learning
Yep.
isn't at odds with like higher standards. And so often we pit those things against each other
Yes.
and we're focusing so narrowly on a standardized test.
Yep.
We have lost the kids before we even get to start, right? You see all the Gallup poll data, you see all of the trends in school. Kids are bored, they're disengaged
Yep.
because they don't have the relationships, they're not doing work that matters, they're not getting feedback,
Yep.
they're just overturning things in for a check mark.
Yep.
So we only have a certain amount of kids. By the time they get a test, they've never read, they haven't spent time writing, they haven't spent time thinking deeply. And so a test, they're tuning out in many, many cases,
Yep.
which is
Yep.
why we have abysmally low test scores across the nation.
Yep.
So here's this quote that I was just putting through together for in a course. Make no mistake, if we continue to focus on ranking students by grades, standardizing curricula, teaching to the test, and valuing compliance over learning and innovation, we will continue to struggle to meet this low bar and fail to develop the learners who find meaningful employment and lead productive lives.
Yep.
And so everyone who's saying, look, they're just, you're taking grades off the table, you're doing whatever it is, they're not valuing the learning that's actually happening. You are doing more to prepare kids to not just take a test. You were going way beyond that to teach them how to learn, how to navigate situations, how to find meaning and purpose. And oh, by the way, because we care about you, Sai, because we value this, we're actually going to show up and do well on this test too and prove that we can learn in deep ways.
Yep.
And if more people understood that, we would actually see our test scores improve if we weren't just focusing on that low bar.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed. Agreed.
That's why I'm not letting off the hook because I want everyone to know that because it's like one of my friends was on this podcast earlier and he's done a great job with his school, Eric Shigela at Vita, and the kids' test scores have improved. And he goes, oh, I'm not going to talk about it. I don't care. It doesn't matter. But then the critics don't understand that it actually is meeting our goals by teaching in ways that are more authentic and meaningful. And so I think that's an important piece because I don't think tests are going to go away. Frankly, there's too much money and influence in them. And so we have to figure out how to make them a smaller part of what we do so we can actually get to the bigger part of what we are compelled to do as educators.
Yep.
So sorry, that was my, I'll step off my soapbox for a moment. Um, so let's go back to you talked about being broken and I think I saw something on Twitter X whatever they call it that you mentioned that within the last couple days and you're not the only person to say that so you say you might be the problem. I just want to see if you can articulate this other thing I saw on Twitter was a teacher was saying that they can't find the balance kind of after COVID and coming back. So can you articulate what that means? Like, what does it feel like to be broken? What are the things that are broken about the system that are making you feel like you've already proven you can do good work with kids? I'm sure you continue to do that. So what is it that's keeping you from doing what you believe and what you want to do in your classroom?
Wow, that's a great question, Katie. Um, you know, I, I think, and I think this will probably resonate with certainly some out there. I still think that though I've learned to dance with doubt through the process that I've gone through to grow as an educator, particularly since 2016. Um, he still comes to visit, right? And I think I can take him for a waltz and walk him away and be done with him. But I think it's the daily wonder and worry, and I think it manifests itself in what we call imposter syndrome a little bit, and it's awful, right? And so even though I believe in what I'm doing, even though I can't walk away from what I'm doing, there's still the wonders and worries. Like for instance, Katie, I don't fail kids. I refuse to fail kids, right?
Yeah.
And as I think about, and I tweeted about this just recently, and as I think about the degree of absenteeism that we're
Mhm.
experiencing right now, and I try to tell my folks here in Cheney, it's like this is not a local thing.
No.
This is an international thing. And talking to my peeps from Canada, I mean, and it's certainly a huge problem in our nation right now. And then I had a very real moment. It's like, am I contributing to that? Because I don't fail my kids, am I making it too easy for them to be gone? But then in the next thought, so the idea is we have to fail them to keep them. And if that's what it is, I'm not about that.
Yeah.
I'm not about, working in a system where to keep them here, we have to threaten to fail them.
Well, that's the compliance piece, right? That's the false narrative that we have kind of believed in is that if we just have more power and more control, and I think you said this at the beginning that what you believed was a good teacher is someone whose kids sat quietly in their seats and listened to me. We still have that belief that that's what a good teacher is that and then if you don't do what I say, I'm going to fail you, I'm going to give you the red pen, I'm going to give you a demerit or move your clip or whatever it happens to be. And I think that's how we lose kids, right? We've lost them before we give them the F.
Yeah.
They're disengaged, they don't feel like they belong, and really it's the not to go back to COVID, but the absenteeism. So many people like it doesn't matter if I'm not at school. I was able to do school in 2 hours a day previously. Why am I showing up 6, 7, 8 hours a day when this is a place that doesn't honor who I am as an individual, doesn't give me work that matters, doesn't allow me to build on strengths and interests, all those things. You have a lot of people who previously disengaged compliantly
Mhm.
are now disengaging and just not showing up.
And so I think for me, Katie, that's hard because it seems like there are some out there who want to return to quote normal. I'm going to suggest that those days are gone. That
Yeah.
that ship sailed a long time ago. But it seems like too many want to just play school harder, right? And what I mean by
Yes.
that is forcing the compliance issue. Um, and I'm just not about that. And so that's the part that leaves me feeling broken. Is like, does that mean I'm a shitty teacher? Sorry, that I'm a shitty teacher then because
No.
I am not willing to play the compliance cop anymore. You know, I don't I don't not I don't fail. It's not that I don't fail kids here. How do I want to say this? That doesn't mean I'm being dismissive of the kid or of my responsibility. It's
Right.
just I'm not willing to fail kids when I believe that our system has failed kids for too long. Once our system gets its business in order, then I will reconsider whether or not I give kids a quote passing grade. But until then, I refuse to fail kids because I don't know, Katie. Maybe I'm the one who failed the kid, right? When we think about learning and we think about how complex that is, and we think about the caseload that I have with 150 kids and the attention that that requires for kids to grow authentically and extensively, how
Hmm.
do I know that I'm not the one who failed? Right. And so I'm not going to fail a kid. I haven't failed a kid in 10 years. I'm going to refuse. And I refuse to do that. But I believe in commitment. I had a colleague today, just today, say, hey, so you don't really subscribe to the higher expectations generate higher outcomes, and what he was talking about was compliance, right? Like,
Right.
and it's like, and it gave me pause. And as I paused, I thought like, no, I believe that I believe in kids having high expectations for themselves for their own outcomes,
Hmm.
right? Is there any, and then I went on and I said, is there any higher expectation than commitment?
Yeah.
That's the expectation I have for my kids, is for them to commit to their own learning because they see the value that it's bringing to their lives now. They can imagine the value that it's going to bring to their lives later. And we pretend that we've been writing that story for years. And I dare say we have not, and that's what I was saying earlier about the institutional issues that we pretend that don't exist. And then when things do get rough, we just try to buttress it up with like, this is what we've always done, this is what we're always going to do, compliance, 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 and it is not going to work anymore. And that puts me in a place where I feel like I'm broken. I think about grading, right? Like I grind on grading all the time. My daughter's calling. Stop. I grind on grading all the time, and I don't want to grind. I want to talk about learning, but grading gets in the way, so I have to grind on grading. And as I grind on grading, I find myself in these reflective, worrisome moments where, like, am I really, again, contributing to the problem here? Am I the problem? But here's the deal, Katie. Once I discovered, and it's not that I think that I've seen the light, right? Like, I
Sure.
didn't ditch it, but I do feel like I discovered the dark side, right? Like, I discovered the dark side of grading when I discovered it wasn't really about learning. It was about ranking, labeling, and sorting kids. And now that I've seen that, and whether it's the light or not, I can't not see it. I can't go back, Katie. If somebody
Yeah.
said, hey, Monty, if you don't go back to grading in this way, you need to be done. I'm going to have to be done. I can't go back.
Well, I think in that trans when you see it, you start to realize. I remember early on in my career where Tom Gutsky came and he was talking about grades and showed how the same set of activities could yield an A or an F depending
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
percentages that
sure.
teachers gave. And it just blew my mind. And I was like, kind of intuitively knew that the grades were subjective,
Yeah,
but the way he framed it, I was like, yes, this makes sense why I hate grading so much, right? I have been on those similar rants that like this doesn't actually reflect. If I give you 7 points versus 10, now you have a C versus an A, and like you just missed the grade. There's a lot of things that we pretend actually are really accurate and give us effective data and tell the accurate story when we know in our heart of hearts that that is not actually true. And what you're just calling out is you're not going to continue to be on that path when you know it's not serving your kids, it's not helping them learn, and you're butting up against a system
yep,
that because it's based in an industrial model, it's like, compliance. We got to move efficiently through the system and we just got to keep going. And the reason I asked about you not being okay is one, because I care and I'm hearing it more and more. But this idea of wanting to do school harder,
Yeah.
I think the way you said it,
Plain
we're butting up. I mean, we're getting to a place where more and more people are finally hitting the wall.
Yeah.
And as frustrating as it hard as it is, and I hear it in your voice, more and more people getting to this wall, I think is a sign that we are building momentum to actually break through.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always feel like it because people are isolated in pockets, but I will say that you exist in many classrooms across the country. Your ideas, your desire to do something different. There's superintendents who want to do something different and want their teachers to try new things. Principals, there's people all over. What we need to do is start having these conversations together, right? About what we want for kids and not focus on the political aspect of it or but really, what is it we want for kids? What is it that we need for our kids so that they can lead successful, productive lives and help all of us move into the future that we all desire?
Yep.
What we're doing in the system is not it.
It's not it. I almost tweeted out this morning. It's like we talk a lot about innovative teachers, but like I almost tweeted out this morning, like where are the innovative principals? Where are the innovative, brave superintendents? And
I got some for you.
yeah, I know, and it hardens me, and I know I'm connected to a few out there, but it's just like, I think for those of us in the classroom right now who are feeling the way we're feeling, we need those people. We need them to say this is okay.
Yeah.
That we are making strides, that we are doing the right work, instead of just going back to the same old, like, well, this year's data shows. It's just like, come on, guys. We know that this is not working. So let's do something about it. I mean, I feel like we're watching the ship sink right now, and it's just like we can do something about it. But like, I've often joked, like, I want to talk to who's in charge. Like, who's in charge, right? Like, I'm not talking about the education secretary. I'm like, who's making the decisions, right? And I think the status quo is making the decisions.
Status quo is making the decisions.
I'm
That's
not
exactly
okay with
right.
that.
That's exactly right, because exactly your frustration, that's why I point out there's all these people doing this work, because it's so easy right now to point fingers of, I'm a teacher in my classroom, I'm working my butt off, and if principals would just do a better job, and I'm not saying you're saying that, but if the superintendent would just get it together and help us do this, then we could move forward. And superintendents are like, gosh, if my teachers would just try something new, we could move forward. So like this angst is coming from multiple places, and it is not coming from the Department of Education, right? It is not coming from our state offices. If y'all are listening and you want to at the state offices, jump on in. But like, it is really going to come from the people in the classrooms, in the schools, doing the work and really saying like, hey, we have a better way, right? I often say, if you have a better way, we got to do it, because because the system is going to continue to keep us moving in the same direction with everyone, like you said, just continuing to forge with the status quo. There's my son too. Those darn kids.
Yeah, those darn kids.
So they bring us back to reality though too, right?
Yep.
So here's what I want to ask you. We're kind of talking about whether it's broken or frustrated or it's not working, we're banging our heads against the wall. Let's think for a minute that you were in charge, right? It is now Monte's Worlds, and you are designing, you pick a day. Like what would the day in the life of a student look like? Or what would the ideal school be like that would actually serve your vision, what kids need?
I think it would at the school level, maybe even at the school level, I think it would begin with, how do we create better learning experiences? That's our guiding question. and how do we create better community, right? Like, because those are the two things that I have found success with in my room. Because when it really comes down to it, Katie, it's just like it's about learning, right? And it's like, how do we continue, how do we, kids come to us generally wanting to learn and
Mhm.
loving to learn.
I
We
agree.
know that from our own children. We know that from our littles, right? In
Mhm.
elementary school. What happens? What
School.
happens? School happens.
School.
No, it does happen. So how do we move from, I just want kids when they walk in the building, they think I am going to grow today. This is
Yeah.
for me. This is for me. That's the school spirit I want, right? Like that is, I don't want the rah rah. I mean, nothing against that. I mean, other than there's more that we can do. Like, I want kids to feel like we're doing this for them, right? I don't think they feel like, I think they feel like this is something we're doing to them.
Yeah.
And we have to change that, right?
Right.
We're doing this for them. And when
Or
we
with them,
Oh,
right?
oh
Like,
yeah, like with and for, right? But like I'm gonna start with for. Like I'm doing this for you, and because I'm doing it for you, I'm gonna join you, and so I'm gonna be with you, kiddo,
yeah.
because I care about your growth as a human being. So human being to human being, it matters to me that you're going to grow, right? And I
Yeah.
am blessed to have the opportunity to be a part of your day. That is how I want the adults and the kids to feel in a building. We have an opportunity, we are going to do something with it. We are going to grow because growing and learning are necessary for a great human experience in our society. And so that's what I want. I just want kids to walk into school feeling like this is something that's for them. And from there we build it, right? And we don't get so caught up in school. I mean, and I I mean, for a lack of a better way to say that,
Just
why
focus on learning,
yeah,
right?
why focus on learning? Why don't kids love school? Why? They should.
Right. Well,
They
and
don't.
much of what they love about school and what our country is enamored with about school is the social aspect,
Yeah.
right? The things that are outside of the actual learning
Yep.
experience. Can I add one question to your
Yeah.
question?
Yeah.
So you said learning experiences and how do we work as a community? Love those. And I would add and argue that we need to not only think about our standards, but we need to redefine what success, what those outcomes are that we're actually striving for, because we
Okay.
know our world is different
Yep.
and our young people, our older people too, we all need skills to be better communicators, collaborators, critical thinkers, all of these skills that people have pushed aside that we know enable our success, but we don't always teach them or talk about them or grow them. And I think that if those are the focus, or whatever the community decides, the learning experience fundamentally has to change.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Like I often wonder why we don't ask the questions continuously. What are we doing and why are we doing it? You know, and I feel like we have come to the place where we really have to seriously think about what is the purpose of public education in our country right now.
Mhm.
I don't think it's the same purpose that we imagined however many years ago. But we continue to basically do the same thing we've done for far too many years,
Yep.
and I think all of those things kind of fit together in the end. Like what are we doing? Why are we doing it? How do we create meaningful, authentic learning experiences for kids? And how do we take advantage of this opportunity to create community, right? Because this is where community begins, is in the classroom and in the schools, I believe. You know,
Right.
but we don't capitalize on that opportunity.
Or
Instead,
celebrate. Yeah.
yeah, we isolate kids. We make it a competitive experience instead of a collaborative community experience. Um, and I just think that there's so much more that we could be doing than what we are doing right now. And that's why I want to talk to who's in charge. Like, let's talk about this. Let's make it happen.
Well, speaking of talking to who's in charge, I think that so I will highlight a few different models that you might know about or just to even think about as you're envisioning what's possible. Um, Last week, as you're talking, it made me think of Bostonia Global High School here in Southern California, Cajon Valley. They're working with kids, they have mentors. The kind of how you're talking about, these teachers are working with kids on their projects. They're growing their competencies and really highlighting how they're developing on these continuums of what they've articulated as important. Students are going out into the world. They're doing, mentorships. They're off campus. They're doing work that matters. They're testing out their ideas about what they want to do post-secondary. And it's a really awesome, awesome school. The kids, as a result, are articulate. They know their strengths and their interests and their values. They have ideas about careers. They're learning. They're advocating for themselves. And you go and you see these kids and you're like, yeah, why aren't we doing this everywhere? This is exactly what our kids need. And you see the stark contrast, right, in a traditional high school classroom where we are just moving kids in a bell schedule and class to class. Those kids are going to have very different outcomes post-secondary because they're going to have different experiences.
Yep.
So I want to close with some rapid fire.
Okay.
First question is, what is one thing that we should stop doing in education?
Grading.
Great. What's one thing we should start doing?
Smiles and frowns. That's my daily commitment to connection.
Love it. What should we keep doing?
Fighting for change.
That's right. What are you focusing on or learning in your own practice right now?
Letting go and letting kids self-assess.
Yes. What's one thing that many people don't know about you?
I do yoga.
Oh, good.
I just started. I'm so proud of myself. My wife finally talked me into it, and I think we're like 6 weeks into it, and I'm so bummed that I didn't start it sooner. So I do yoga.
I love it. Do you have a favorite quote or saying?
I hate a Roman named status quo, from Fahrenheit 451.
Good stuff. What are you grateful for right now?
Oh, so much. My wife. My wife. She's my witness.
Awesome. Last question. What's your hope for the future of education?
That our current kids demand more for their own kids.
Oh, that's so good. Monte, thank you. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, to get fired up, to, collectively bang our heads against the wall and think about what's possible. But I do believe that there's a breakthrough. It's coming. I know it is. There has to be.
Yep.
So thank you for doing the work. Thank you for being with the kids, teaching them, letting them learn, and helping us all learn as we follow your journey.
Okay. Thank you, Katie. I appreciate you.
Thank you.